You've seen the red flags, maybe not all of them, but like every woman that I've worked with, you convinced yourself to move past them. So the problem isn't that you couldn't see them. The problem is you stopped trusting yourself when you did. And today that changes. Welcome to the other side. My name is Carrie Hudson. I'm a therapist and a guide, helping women to break toxic relationship patterns, reclaim confidence, and discover the blueprint for healthy, lasting love. And today I'm going to walk you through the 5 reasons why you miss red flags. And I'm going to show you how the ability to detect them has been with you all along. So if that's what you need, stick around because we are digging in right now. And the reason why we miss red flags overall is because there isn't a strong connection with the self. So, your connection with your own body, with your own emotions, with your own mind is not strong, it's weak. So, when things come up, there is not this clear signal and sign that says, okay, this is what's happening. Let me lean into it. Let me trust it. Your world, the center of your world, actually exists outside of yourself. So you are looking to others to validate, to confirm, to give you direction. You are outward centric, or your focus is outward centric versus inward, right? And when that disconnection exists, it is easy to breeze past all things that are dangerous and all of the signs that tell you, hey, stop. Because that is essentially what a red flag does. It is a stop sign, right? It's not a slow down, be cautious, although, on some level you can sort of slow down and double check and check in to see if what it is that you're detecting is actually that red stop sign. But overall, you are not seeing it for what it is. So it's not that you can't see the red flags, you are seeing them, but there is something that is not converting once it hits and lands with you. Because again, there is a weak self connection. So there are 5 ways in which this self connection, the weakness manifests, and we're going to dig into that. And the first manifestation of this self disconnection is that you were ultimately taught by your circumstances and by the people around you that your feelings were too much. So maybe you couldn't cry, you couldn't be angry, you couldn't talk, maybe you couldn't express yourself. So any form of self expression was sort of met with some consequence that didn't feel good, either being ignored, sent to your room. We're talking about during childhood. And so over time, you've sort of leaned into those messages, and they've become ingrained in terms of how you show up for yourself and even with others. So even with others, you may not express yourself, you may not say how it is you actually feel, but ultimately you are pushing away your feelings, right? And this is one of the worst things that you can do for yourself in order to survive and actually discover healthy relationships. You are probably often putting yourself in distressing situations, but by the time you realize that the distress is there, you are knee deep in the thing, and it's not quite as easy to walk away and get out. There's a lot of feelings and a lot of whatever, money, life circumstances, whatever it is, that have become entangled because the initial emotions that told you, hey, this isn't quite the right thing for us, you pushed away. And the reality is this is a complex one, right? Because there is a difference between your gut and your emotions. And your gut is actually pretty quiet, it's still, it's stable, it doesn't speak really loud, it says the thing once and sort of backs off. With each circumstance, the gut will sort of speak and back off and let you figure it out. The emotions are quite different, actually. And so this actually becomes a bit more complicated because there are emotions that come up situationally, right? Where you can be engaging with someone who actually upsets you, but you don't read it as upset in the moment because you are suppressing those emotions. But then there are other emotions that sort of spring up as a result of some of the things we've talked about before in terms of these high doses of dopamine, right? Where there's now the emotion that wants to get that high again, right? And again, we've talked about how love bombing and excessive attention and admiration and excessive amounts of time spent can actually like skyrocket the dopamine levels so that a situation becomes addictive. So, the emotions become sort of tangled in that where there's this drive to get that dopamine hit so that that emotion actually trumps the gut. And most of the times any emotion will trump the gut, because if the gut is speaking, again, it's not loud, but emotions can be quite loud and repetitive and persistent, right? With the exception of the ones that you've learned to suppress. So, again, this one is a bit complicated, but when you walk around believing that you are too much, then what you often do is shrink. And when you shrink, you often defer to the other person. And when you are always deferring to the other person, your needs almost never get met, right? Unless you are deferring to someone who is very thoughtful and considerate and kind. And I imagine the reason you're here is because you have fallen into quite the opposite, the relationships with quite the opposite type of person. And so when you often defer to other people, you don't know what your emotions are, you aren't checking in with yourself, then you aren't able to make good decisions. And we never make decisions while we're in our emotions, but we do use our emotions to help us to make decisions for ourselves. Because if you are in a situation and you are afraid, the emotion of fear is telling you that this environment is not safe or it's scary. And so if you're in the emotion, it could cause you to maybe um, overreact and to run or to do something that might actually put you in more danger. But if you allow the emotion to sort of subside, you can use the evidence of the emotion to tell you, hey, it's time to go, right? Sometimes emotions you do need to react in the emotion if there's a bear or a snake or something attacking you or someone attacking you, then the fear and that emotion gets you going, right? So there's some wisdom that has to be applied when it comes to emotion, and that requires a bit more work and a lot more intention around understanding your emotions, which you can do with the help of a therapist or on your own if you take the time to really understand what's right for you. Because ultimately, even when you're working with a therapist, it is about what's right for you, right? The therapist isn't the expert on your life, you are. But again, beginning to understand that your emotions actually aren't too much. You aren't too much. That was a message that maybe was directly or indirectly taught to you by other people, and usually through circumstances, right? The way you were treated. And so you begin to interpret that as I'm too much. But being too much can often cause you to harm yourself if you hold that belief about yourself. So beginning to put down or set aside the belief that I'm too much, and maybe even reframing that as I'm too much for them. But there is someone out here who I'm not too much for. There is someone who I'm just enough for, right? Or I'm more than enough. And sometimes even the more than enough still bleeds into the too much. And then there's also the not enoughness that also comes up. But ultimately, this is about being able to embrace yourself instead of pushing yourself away. Because if you push yourself away, then what you are ultimately doing is creating space for someone outside of you to fill the space that belongs to you. And they will never meet your needs. They will always, almost always, selfishly run amok in your life. Okay? So, learning and understanding that you're not too much, that maybe that was something that you learned, Maybe that was something that was told to you. And when you really look at it, if you look at your history of relationships, who were the people that reinforced this idea that you were too much? Are they people who are healthy? Are they people who are still around? Are they people who added value to your life? Or are they people who wreaked havoc in your life? So, do we want to use them as the metric by which you judge yourself? Right? Something to think about. So, on to number 2. Familiarity felt like safety. You develop this comfort around what's familiar. And again, if we look at the history of your relationships, what has been familiar, what has come to be familiar, is based on those relationships. And if you look at the history of your relationships, are those people actually safe, emotionally safe? Right? Can you let your guard down? Can you be seen and heard with them? Are your needs met when you ask? Right? Are you able to say, hey, can you support me in this? Can you come through for this? And then they show up for you. Or are they the ones that you often show up for, and when you look up, no one is around? Right? And so the brain is sort of funny because it wants ease. It wants to sort of lean in and lock into what's familiar. And what's familiar isn't always safe. So what you have known doesn't have to be what you will go on to know, right? Who you were and how you existed in relationships before doesn't have to be who you will be and how you will continue to exist in relationships. And, the reality is change is hard. But change isn't always bad, and often change is necessary, especially as you grow. Especially, again, if you take stock on your relationship history and realize that this isn't what I want for myself anymore, then it most definitely requires change. Okay? And change means really sticking through some difficult, some challenging realities, right? For example, if you are used to dating sort of the person that brings the spark, sitting through the difficulty of someone who doesn't bring an initial spark and going through the get to know you process and taking the time to really get to know this person versus dismissing them as boring or uninteresting or not your type or whatever the case may be. Because when you look at it, your type has gotten you right to where you are today, right? Whether it's your type of mate, your type of friend, right? The fun always what has it gotten you? And so it's time to pause and not allow the brain to just run on autopilot, right? Because that's what our brains want to do. It makes life so much easier, and it actually does when what's on autopilot actually gets you to your destination, right? To the desired end that you want. But if your autopilot is leading you down dead ends, it's leading you into wrecks and crashes, it's leading you to emotional pain and turmoil, then it's time to turn off the autopilot and turn on, conscious thought and logic and beginning to make sense of what doesn't always feel good. Okay? Because a lot of times the emotions will tell you that you aren't good enough for someone who's actually safe and consistent. And that begins to translate into an issue you project onto them versus you recognizing that, oh, actually, this is me projecting onto them what I think about myself. Projection is a huge defense mechanism, and many of us don't know that we're doing it. And so when we shift away from what's familiar, it is important to, again, be conscious and active in our thinking and be mindful about what thoughts are playing a role in our decisions. Because when we're not, we shift into, again, projection, defensiveness, other autopilot moves, right? That lead us right back to the same destination that we don't want. So if you want something better, it requires you to be a conscious player in your life, consciously active in your life, to consciously choose what's new, right? What's undiscovered, what's untapped in for yourself. I often go through this with my clients and have them think about things that they actually want to do that they've never done before, right? The things that they even like to do. Because often when you are deferring to the other person, as we've said before, you don't even know what you like. You couldn't even identify what you want for dinner. And that's huge, right? You don't know what you have a taste for, especially when it's in the company of a group of people or another person where you just defer to them. And you might find yourself sort of disappointed with the choices that they make. So, shifting away from this familiar move of just shrinking, being quiet, choosing the same type of person, gravitating to this same feeling that you get from someone, and try something new and stick with it, right? Especially if you're doing the work. It won't always work when you're not, because you just can't take it, right? The whole ick thing, especially over things that aren't icky on the surface, it's your autopilot telling you this doesn't fit. This is like your blueprint, right? You have a blueprint you're coming with, and when they don't fit, you get icks, you're annoyed, you're turned off by even the smallest things that another person who's extremely toxic or abusive would never touch those buttons. But they lead you down the path that goes right to that wall that you keep running into. So I want to encourage you to, take some time to think about choosing something new, doing things that are different, stepping out of what's familiar. Number 3, you've made their reality more credible than your own. When you, again, make someone else the center of your world, the things that they say, the things that they do, everything becomes wonderful, especially in the early stages about them. So you're taking these red flags and you're painting them pink and green and blue and flowery and all the things, because again, you don't have the ability or the skill at the moment to really lean into the things that you have in you, your gut, your emotion, the tools that God literally placed inside of you to be able to make good decisions for yourself. And so you have, again, deferred to the other person. You've put them in the driver's seat of your life and your emotion, and they aren't equipped or able to lead. It's fine to do that or to test it out with someone, but when you see they're leading you in the wrong direction, you got to pull it back. So oftentimes what this comes with is excusing other people's behavior. So, they're mistreating people. Oh, they're just having a bad day, right? They, whatever, right? You're painting this something other than what it is, right? They say they love you, and you believe that because it fits what you need it to fit. It fits the blueprint. It fits, where you want this thing to go. But when in reality, you look at it, they don't treat you lovingly, right? I just had this conversation the other day where, okay, you say this is love. Tell me what love actually is, right? So we create this list of what love actually is. And now tell me how you're being treated. Because if you're telling me this person is going to do something that's hurtful and harmful to you, it doesn't line up if we go backwards to what love is and that this person loves you. So now these are words. And this doesn't mean that we can say how other people actually feel or what they truly think or, what's actually in their heart. That isn't ours to detect. What's ours to detect within ourselves is where it lands for me, right? Because again, if you call this love and I call this love, and it doesn't align, we don't fit. Plain and simple as that. There is no interpreting it as something, there is no excusing it. It's reality. In reality, this is what I need for love. This is what you give for love. It doesn't fit. I have to go. Okay? No more painting the red flag green, pink, blue, purple. Right? No more fun colors out of this thing that's not fun. You have to be able to see reality just as it is. And when you make the other person's reality your own and you start making meaning of certain behaviors as something better than what they actually are, you are setting yourself up for disaster. Because you're making the meaning, and soon you end up on the other end of this thing where you're excusing it because you're witnessing it and you're seeing how they play out with other people, and you've made all the excuses because they're giving you all the excuses because they've told you all of these victim things, and they're treating this person this way, and you're excusing it. But then one day it's your turn and you end up in that very position, and now there is no more excusing it. You can for a time, but eventually it's no more of an excuse, it's a pattern. They did it with other people, they're doing it with you, they will continue to do it with you. So sitting in reality is the solution. In reality, this is what happened and I don't like it. Boom, I'm out. That's it. Plain and simple as that. So, number 4, you learned that being in love, being in a relationship meant you needed to override yourself. And often that idea is rooted in like this struggle love kind of concept where, you hear people who have been married for decades, 40 and 50 years, talk about how in order to stay together, they've had to overcome some adversity and some trying times and all the things. And while that is most certainly true, that dynamic is not the foundation of a relationship that's made to last that long, right? It's not the foundation of healthy relationships. These are the stories that we hear and we sort of pull it out because we might be in the thick of things with our own relationship and it feels like a struggle and it's constantly a struggle. So we use that to justify where we are. When in reality, relationships are not based, healthy relationships are not based and rooted in struggle, in turmoil, in drama. Healthy relationships are rooted in trust and consistency and kindness and mutual respect and reliability and all of the things, right? There's an interdependence where we can come together and lean on each other. And that's what happens most of the time. But there are times where we have a moment, right? Where we fall out and we say something to hurt the other person's feelings or whatever it is, or we do something, make a bad decision for the family or for the relationship. And so all those things are most certain to happen when you are in relationship with someone. This is not a walk in the park relationships, but they should be for the most part, right? You walk in through the park and then you get to whatever, right? The swamps. And then you come back out and there's the park again and you're walking in the park and it's all wonderful, right? But it isn't mostly swampland. And if you find yourself believing that you have to always be the one sacrificing and giving and forgiving and excusing, that is not what healthy relationships are made of. That was not the ideal for you to have to overcome all of those things. Okay. So I want to encourage you to take stock of that because you shouldn't be in a healthy relationship and fighting and fussing and arguing all the time at each other's throat, criticizing one another, pointing out one another's defects or issues. No, that's not love. Love accepts as you are. And if you can't accept someone just the way that they are without nitpicking and fixing and always criticizing, I would argue, by my definition, that it isn't love. And number 5, you don't know what it even looks like to trust yourself because you really never have, right? You've never leaned into your gut and allowed yourself to see how it led you down the right path, because the truth is, that's one thing in you that's never wrong, your gut. You just have to know what it is, right? Again, it's the quietest part of us. It's quiet, it speaks real quick, and then it pulls back until the next time something happens, and it'll speak real quick, and then it pulls back. Okay, it's not going to fight you, it's not going to convince you. Anything trying to fight and struggle and convince to do something is usually emotion. Okay, and learning to trust yourself is a skill. And I imagine if you are a high achieving woman, you've gotten degrees, you have a career, you're relatively successful in something, then in that area of your life you have learned to really trust yourself. You've learned to trust your instincts. You know what works, you know what doesn't work. What you do know in the context of love is that what you've been doing isn't working, right? And oftentimes what you haven't done was trust yourself. You've probably given too much trust and leaned in a little too much with other people, right? And that's often led you astray. So being able to trust yourself really requires you to slow down and to make a decision that your emotions might fight against, right? And it requires you to really lean into logic, right? I've seen this before. I've been on this road with someone who does X, Y, and Z, and I know where that ends. And I don't really want to spend the time doing it again to see if this will magically somehow end up differently. I'm going to trust myself on this one to do it differently. And I think often the reason why we don't trust ourselves is because there is this internal message that says, I'm not worthy of anything better, that this is my lot in life, that this is the type of man that I was designated and designed to be with. And somehow I have to find one that I can fix and build up and make the perfect man for me. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Okay? There are millions of people probably in your city. Depends on where you live, right? And if not, in the surrounding city. There are billions of people on the earth. There is someone out there that you do not have to fix, build, tolerate, bend over backward for, jump through fiery hoops for. But that's part of building up your self-esteem and self-worth, so that you can trust that when you make this decision, that it won't result in me being lonely forever. So often we are not leaning into the ability to trust ourselves because of the message that says, if I don't do this, I might not ever meet someone. And that could be true. But do you want to live like whatever it is that you keep living in forever, ignoring red flags that are slapping you and abusing you in your face? I would venture to guess that ultimately the answer is no, right? I sort of personally lean into the mantra, I can do bad by myself, right? I don't need the weight of dragging someone else, and we're both doing bad. And I'm probably doing worse because I'm dragging you, right? That's just me though. So, if you've seen yourself in this, if you're seeing yourself in these 5 areas, if you know that you've breezed past red flags, if you've seen the red flags and noted them and still went head first anyway, I want to invite you to slow down and to take the Relationship Pattern Diagnostic. It is a way for you to really begin to see your pattern so you can step back and see yourself objectively, right? Because when you're in it, you can't always see what you're doing, even though there's part of you that knows. So I want to invite you to take a pause. It'll take about 10 minutes of your time, and you will receive the results instantly by email. of what your pattern looks like. And if you are ready to do the deeper work of healing your patterns and becoming a woman who can no longer be abused, no longer fall into this trap of red flags that you ignore, so on and so forth, who no longer chooses the toxic man, but finds someone who's healthy and leans into that, I want to invite you to check out the restoration group. The links for both will be in the description, so check it out. And I want to thank you for sticking with me and learning about these 5 ways in which you have ignored red flags. And I invite you to subscribe, to like. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe so that you're notified when new videos drop every other Sunday on Break Free Sundays. Take good care of yourself. I'll see you next time.